Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
All right, so you said yes to the full fiscal year 2026 Homeland Security funding bill. Includes about $10 billion more in ICE funding as part of DHS appropriations. Why does ICE need more money?
Well, first of all, there were 7 Democrats that joined us, so this did have bipartisan support to get across the finish line. But secondarily, this really wouldn't be an issue if we didn't have a calamity over the last 4 years. You saw during Joe Biden's presidency over 10 million people flood across our borders. We saw how it overwhelmed our cities and our social safety net. And you saw an increase in crime. You saw it in New York City. Eric Adams, the former mayor, spoke passionately about this during his time because of the challenges that New York City was facing. The big challenge here, though, is that you have sanctuary cities and states that refuse to cooperate with federal officials when it comes to immigration enforcement. And so they prevent local law enforcement from cooperating. They prevent local law enforcement from being involved in these investigations. And so ICE needs more agents to be able to effectively do its job. You've seen 675,000 people.
Just to interrupt for a second, we've seen ICE agents, like for instance in Minnesota, there was like 6 or 7 ICE agents going into the home of a guy who was an American citizen and dragging him out in his underwear. Why do you need 6 or 7 ICE agents to go into the wrong home and take a guy out in his underwear?
Look, that example is a unfortunate situation, but you look at the fact that you had 675,000 people deported last year. Over 70% of them had a criminal record. And you have people who have had deportation orders against them going back 20, 30 years that are still in the United States. What that means is they adjudicated the court process and chose to ignore it. And unfortunately, we've had so many municipalities refuse to cooperate with federal law enforcement for decades. And it has only gotten worse. And so what happens in these types of situations is they're trying to flood the zone. Obviously, you have the situation with the 5-year-old boy. That should not happen, and we don't want that to happen. And that's something that I think, the Department of Homeland Security and immigration officials need to ensure does not happen again.
But I will tell you, boy, there's the guy in his underwear. There's Renee Nicole Good, shot 3 times, once in the, the left side of her temple. I mean, you can argue about whether the guy was acting, really did fear for his life in the moment, but it doesn't. The video does not look good. And then there's just the fact that the poll numbers show. The poll numbers. Hold on, let me get it out. The poll numbers show that people. The reason I'm asking you this is because I know you're in a competitive district, and I know there are people out there who do truly believe in border enforcement, immigration enforcement, and agree with you that what happened during the Biden administration was too much. It was way too much, too quickly. It did not work, and there needs to be an adjustment. But they're also the same people who look at what's happening now and the violence and the cruelty or the lack of humanity that they're seeing and say, this is not the way I want it to be done. So as a Republican who's running for his seat again, how do you promise them, hey, listen, we're going to get this done, but we're not going to be terrible about it. We're not going to be cruel. We're not going to be mean about it. I'm not okay with what you're seeing on TV either.
Right. So a lot of things can be true at once, right? Number one, what happened with Renee Good was tragic. We don't want to see anybody lose their life. At the same token, there's a reason why people should not interfere with law enforcement, period. And it's fine to protest. It is fine to protest. You have the right to do that. But when you use your vehicle to block law enforcement from doing their jobs, and ultimately she did hit the officer, he was injured. You can't dismiss that.
We haven't had an independent investigation.
Katie,
so I can't say any of those
things. Right, but Katie, you're making you made a judgment. You made a judgment before an investigation. And the fact is that the officer was hit. The video shows that. You can't dispute that. And again, I think moreover, if you'd allow me to finish, please. The fact is that law enforcement has a job to do. And unfortunately, it wouldn't be necessary to do it on this scale if you didn't have over 10.5 million migrants come into the country over the last 4 years. When you look at those that have been deported, the 675,000 over the last year, over 70% of them had a criminal record. Now, with that being said, I've been one of the lead co-sponsors on the Dignity Act for a reason. We need comprehensive immigration reform in this country. People who have been in this country for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, who have been participating in the workforce, whose children or grandchildren are American citizens. We don't want to break families up. And there is bipartisan support for actually fixing our immigration system, which has not been reformed in 40 years. The system is broken. I think we can all acknowledge that. We don't want to see a situation where innocent people who do not have criminal records but did violate federal immigration laws are being dragged out of their homes. I don't want to see that. I do want to see a situation where they can go through a process to be on a legal pathway and to actually go through a system and abide by it. That is something that we should work towards. There is legislation to do that, the Dignity Act, which I have been championing along with Maria Salazar, Veronica Escobar. There is a growing number of members in both parties that agree we have to address the fundamental problems with our immigration system. We have secured the border effectively. You've had 8 straight months of net zero illegal border crossings. That is a positive step forward. That will allow us to actually address the challenges within the system and within our country. And I think that's what we need to focus our efforts on.
So, Congressman, I think you're right about the people are happy that, generally speaking, that the border is much less porous than it was. Your numbers on the number of criminals that were deported, I don't know if they're. There's dispute about it. I mean, the Cato Institute says that 73% had no conviction, the ones that were deported. The New York Times has less than 30% arrested between January 20th and October 2025 had a criminal record. So how a criminal record is being defined there, I think there's more detail needed. And whether there was a conviction or just an allegation, I think there's more detail needed. There's also been a lot of stories about people who have been working here for 20, 25, 30 years who did not have any criminal convictions, who've gotten rounded up in this. So the way that this enforcement is being done, I don't think a lot of Americans watch it and see it and trust that the way that you're describing it is actually the way it's being accomplished. But beyond that, I mean, you have an administration that is, and I agree that comprehensive immigration reform is absolutely needed. Most Americans agree with that, and they want to see Congress get it done, and then a president of the United States sign it. But how do you trust a White House when they're saying, you know, we're getting all the worst of the worst and these bad guys, when the numbers don't back it up, and then also when they're putting out fake imagery? I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. They arrested a woman in the church protest. I'm not going to get into the details of the church protest, but they arrested her. DHS puts out an image of her where she looks composed. And then the White House puts an image out of her 30 minutes later where she's been AI manipulated to look like she's crying and disheveled. This is the White House putting out AI-generated images that are not memes, that are just manipulated without saying that they're manipulated. How do you trust a White House when they're not being truthful like this?
Well, I have not seen that image, and certainly that should not be done from the standpoint of putting something out. It should be the exact image. But what I would say to you is this. We have seen, obviously, on both sides, people want to highlight the story that fits their narrative. And ultimately, when I see the list of people that have been detained,